Welcome to another Pitchie Talks, everybody. This time, Pitchie Talks horror games. A critical, non-definitive look at horror games that I believe to deliver on their promise of being a horror game, and why I believe they deliver on that promise. Now, what makes a good horror game? Many critics and fans tend to quantify it based on several factors like gore, atmosphere, sound, story, combat, and art direction. These are all things that can make a good game, and some are more important than the others. For me personally, the factor that separates the best from the rest is merely one. Did it shake my heart? Now, you might be asking, Pitchie, what does that even mean? You may have heard me use this term before in reference to the seminal 2001 video game Silent Hill 2. Coined by Satoru Takayoshi and adopted by me, shaking one's heart refers to the irreducible experience that a piece of media can have on a person. Things that make you think deeply, that stick with you for days afterwards. The things that cause an existential crisis. So, which games have the dubious and ephemeral distinction of having shook my heart? Warning, spoilers abound throughout this. I'm going to give my top 5. I've whittled it down to 5. These are not my all-time favorites, but these are the 5 horror games that I believe deliver on their promise of being horror. And I will go into why they shook my heart and why I believe that they deliver on that. Now, kicking off this list, not a game, but a demo that has had the horror gaming world in a chokehold for 11 years, Hideo Kojima's E.T. I've already covered this in a previous Pitchie Talk, so I won't spend too much time on it. E.T.'s claustrophobic hallways, looping structure, lack of player autonomy, bare bones mechanics, and horrific, obscure, esoteric story, combined with droning and unnerving sounds and music and effects to create not a game, but an experience that feels genuinely haunted to play. A lack of answers both in the demo and how the demo works adds to the feeling of playing a genuinely cursed game while you loop the hall, trying to get that terrible Eraserhead Think Fetus and Lisa to let you go. Silent Hill 2, the prodigal son of psychological horror. Not much can be said about it that hasn't already been said before, so, let's get cracking on it. It did have a remake recently, but tragically, it was mid. As seen in a previous Pitchie Talks, which I did rerun yesterday, if you want to go watch the VOD for that, you can see me break down why I hate the Silent Hill 2 remake. Silent Hill 2 is an incredibly uncomfortable, obtuse, janky, and affecting game. Drawing from Crime and Punishment, Lost Highway, Jacob's Ladder, Silent Hill 2 was and is unique as a sequel that had little connection to its predecessor, surpassing it in the cultural landscape. The cramped locales and grotesque enemy designs that players encounter, along with the groaning, clanking, melody-laden soundtrack, produce a distinct tension, evoking a disquietingly Lynchian sense of wrongness that keeps players on their toes while they solve puzzles and blast through admittedly pedestrian combat. The exploration of grief, guilt, denial, cowardice, and psychological self-flagellation was innovative at the time in the way that it used the player's actions as James to determine whether he continues in his denial, gives way to his guilt and his grief, or if he atones for his sins and leaves Silent Hill behind. Many games try and fail to live up to the legacy of Silent Hill 2, and for good reason. It set the standard, for better or worse, for all narrative psychological horrors that came after it. Next up, we have Mouthwashing, the sophomore effort from Swedish developers Wrong Organ. You might recognize them from their first free game, How Fish is Made, a short existential exploration of free will. It also had a singing, dancing, tongue-eating parasite. It was really fun. I really liked How Fish is Made. I really like Mouthwashing too, obviously. Mouthwashing is a first-person narrative horror game where we witness the crash of the space freighter Tulpar and the subsequent breakdown of its 5 crew members as they drift through space on a ship full of mouthwash on a mouthful of mouthwash. They drift on a mouthful of mouthwash with little hope of rescue. The story is presented in memento-like chunks, jumping back and forth between events before the crash, after the crash, and after a redacted point of time. Much of the game's events are left to the player to figure out as the narrative bounces back and forth in time, utilizing abrupt utilizing abrupt visual auditory glitching as a transition to cut off one scene and move to the next. Wrong Oregon narrative lead Joanna Kasuranen described the core design principle as the story is the puzzle, which leaves the players to extrapolate from what they're seeing and piece together the events of the good ship Tulpar. The submarine-inspired, cramped ship design and oppressive soundscape all combine to work to create a very, very unsettling atmosphere, while the tension of the narrative ratchets constantly upward. Much like my beloved Silent Hill 2, Mouthwashing uses unreliable narrators, bizarre and surreal set pieces, and grotesque imagery to immerse us in an exploration of grief, guilt, and delusion as the situation and characters deteriorate, while all you can do is watch. A true psychological horror, and in my opinion, a perfect successor to the high watermark of psychological horror that is Silent Hill 2. Next up, Bile Exhumed. Bile Exhumed was developed by Final Girl Games and published by Dread XP as a fundraising shareware after being banned from Steam a day before launch for sexual content involving real people. Fun fact, there is no actual nudity in this game. It's default censored. In Vile, players are tasked with going through a Y2K-era computer, belonging to a man with an interest in the burgeoning gore porn scene and a fixation on his favorite star, Candy Corpse. As you go through this man's online activities, emails, files, a disturbing picture of violence starts to emerge. Vile uses almost no music, relying instead on the steady hum and clicking of an old-school computer interface. The gameplay is pretty sparse, consisting of notes and some decent code-breaking puzzles, hidden in the throwback format of messenger apps and hidden websites and flash horror games and some dark web security. The gradual unveiling of details in the major incidents is very deliberately paced and calibrated to cause a certain amount of stomach-dropping dread in the player, and it draws on real-life parasociality, online sex work, and male entitlement to craft a short but very effective piece of psychological horror. Last, but certainly not least, we have Routine. Routine was developed by Lunar Software. It underwent 13 years of delays. It was first announced in 2012. It got a complete overhaul in 2020 after Lunar Software partnered with Raw Fury to publish the game. It went through Unreal Engine 3, Unreal Engine 4, before finally settling in at Unreal Engine 5. And it launched in 2025, 13 years after it first announced. But is it good? Emphatically, yes. On the surface, Routine may look to be a mediocre walking sim inspired by Alien Isolation and Dead Space with little to set it apart from its contemporaries. In practice, however, Routine is a deeply tense and unnerving experience that sets itself apart with a commitment to a purely diegetic cassette futurism interface and a very esoteric story told in fragments. Many players will be put off by how little the game holds their hands by having absolutely no heads-up display to speak of in the game, leaving it up to us to just sort of wander. The sound design, the fluorescent buzzing, the ambient noises of the moon base, the cramped and suffocating hallways and vents, even the astronaut helmet that obscures the edges of the screen, the clanking of the boots when you're running to find a safe room. Even though there are no safe rooms in Routine, it all adds up to one of the most tense and unnerving experiences I've had in a game in a long, long time. Now, to sort of move forward. What do these 5 games all have in common? What makes them so scary? Do I have a point to all of this? I do! But we're going to take a brief sidebar to talk about the theory of horror. Stephen King's nonfiction book, Danse Macabre, was published in 1981. It went over his own writing, as well as influencing genre works in the 19th and 20th century. It goes over like Old Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It goes over the Cat People. It goes over Carnival of Souls. It goes over different writing. It goes over Dracula and how that came to be. I read this book at a really young age, and in it he talks about 3 types of terror. Number 1, the gross out, or revulsion. It's the severed head. It's when in the substance when Randy Quaid is eating the shrimp, you know, it's the wet squelch of mold and blood. It's the basis of the torture porn genre as a whole. The horror is number 2, and that is the unnatural. That's something grabbing you in the dark. That's this fucking horrible bear from Annihilation. It's when you see the dead walking, it's giant spiders, it's Godzilla. And then the apex of this 3 types of terror is the terror, which Stephen King describes as the feeling when the lights go out and you can feel something behind you, but when you turn around, there's nothing there, like in The Strangers. Or when you come home and everything you own has been replaced by an almost exact substitute, and you can't pinpoint why you think so. This last point was expounded upon by Mark Fisher in his 2016 novel, The Weird and the Eerie, which sort of critiqued a Freudian idea of unheimlich, or the uncanny, as very restrictive. Freud basically the basis of that was that it put the familiar, or it put the unfamiliar into familiar. Whereas Mark Fisher suggests that the weird and the eerie, which are 2 very subtle, pedantic ways of separating types of terror, and I mean terror, that it allows us to see the inside. Allows us to see the familiar from the perspective of the unfamiliar. And he differentiated between the weird and the eerie by saying that the weird points to something that is wrong, carefully pointing out that it's not the thing itself that is wrong, but rather the conception of the world. Think about Get Out. The way that Get Out utilized a very specific point of view and very specific critiques about society and how it treated Black bodies, that was the weird one. The eerie that he wrote about was characterized by a feeling of not knowing if something is there. So that's if anyone's seen Skinamarink, the empty spaces. Skinamarink uses empty spaces, big empty screens, to force you to sort of look into the darkness and see if something is there. It's like in It Follows. You're always looking on the edges of the screen to see what's there. He wrote that the eerie was contrasting presence with absence. So if you think that something's there, but it's not there, or the failure of absence when something is present when there should be nothing. Think about Paranormal Activity in the way that it does its, especially I think it was Paranormal Activity 4 that had the fan. And think about the way that the fan turned back and forth. And every time it turned, you'd be expecting something. That utilized the eerie, right? It was building that tension of terror, and then, boom, drops you into horror with a jump scare. So I find that in my experience, both observing people who play games and playing games myself, that a lot of that process becomes really automated. The logic and the drive and the really thinking about the game and what you're doing and your actions is really deadened, especially in like the live streaming. Like, I know I'm doing this on Twitch, but on Twitch, I see a lot of people, a lot of streamers just being like, I don't want to read this lore. I don't want to read this note. I don't want to do this. This is annoying. I want to get to the good stuff. And I've been guilty of it. I've been there. You want to get that next hit of dopamine from like quest complete and task done, enemy defeated, you know? A Russian literary theorist named Viktor Shklovsky, which is a great name, coined the term ostranenie, or defamiliarization, in 1917 as an artistic technique, which is presenting familiar things in an unfamiliar way, such as Tolstoy using the perspective of a horse in his story Kostomer, or Orwell using farm animals in 1984 as a direct allegory to the political conflicts that he was experiencing at the time. The way that David Lynch movies feel disjointed and bizarre, something as simple as going to a diner becomes this weird, uncanny, dreamlike sequence. Like there's something about the way that David Lynch presents things that's very unfamiliar. This intersection of the uncanny, of the weird, of the eerie, of the terror, as Stephen King says, is really, to me, one of the most sublime markers of effective horror. And if I can continue on the sidebar, one of the things that made Routine so scary to me was the fact that it had none of the usual markers of a video game at all. It tutorialized you on the movement just a little bit, but it has no heads-up display. It has no directions. It has no journal. It is just you and your scanner that you have to manually press the buttons on, and those fucking robots, and some other stuff. We're not going to get too into it. The immersion in the actions that you do in Routine is so complete. I struggled with it at first, but it really made me think like an electrical engineer sent to this moon base. And I think that presenting a video game in a way that feels so unlike a video game was really clever for immersion and for building tension. Now, returning from our sidebar to our 5 games. These top 5 heart shakers, which is what I'm calling them, have 3 things in common, all right? Tension, atmosphere up the ass. They have atmosphere coming out the wazoo, and brevity. Now, what do these games do to create the suffocating atmosphere and tension that they've inflicted upon me? Why are my top 5 most terrifying games my top 5 and on this list when one of them is at most like maybe 8 hours long? Maybe 12 if you're really going through every corner, and that's Silent Hill 2. It's maybe 12 hours if you're really looking through every nook and cranny in that game, all right? So, things that they have in common. Isolation. What makes isolation scary? Think about how weird we get when we're alone. The unnerving liminality of streets and shops during COVID quarantine, how unsettling an empty mall or an empty airport is. Human beings are not built for isolation. We get weird. There's a reason why it's considered torture. The other thing that these games have in common is they all feature very claustrophobic environments or experiences. Think about the last time that you were in a small space, or you were trapped in a situation that you couldn't get out of, and it was emotionally claustrophobic. That's part of why buried alive sequences are so effective. Not everybody has this fear, but it's very common. I don't like being in small spaces. It freaks me out a little bit. I can't watch The Descent all the time because It scares me. It's too closed in. I don't like it. It makes my chest hurt. And then the third thing that every horror game has in common on my list is the sound design. Think about ambient creaks and groans in Resident Evil 7 in the Baker house. Think about the long stretches of silence in the original Silent Hill 2, where all you can hear is James's footsteps echoing in the Woodside apartments. Think about even PT and the low building groaning of Lisa. You can hear her getting closer and closer. You can hear her in one ear, but when you turn around, she's not there. Above all, these games do not overstay their welcome. A major part of horror for me personally, and in my opinion as a genre, is the tension. But very equally important and often forgotten is the relief of that tension. It's like, there's a reason why they say that comedy and horror are so interlaced, because comedy is horror with a punchline. The punchline is the relief of that tension. Comedy builds up tension. If you look at old Key and Peele sketches, you'll notice that a lot of their setups have a similar sense of dread and anxiety to them. And it's got the buildup, and then it's got the puncture of the release of that tension and that buildup with a punchline. And with horror, it's the same thing. It's a buildup. It's a buildup, and it's a constant upwards trajectory of tension building, whether it's through like sound, through whether it's through the atmosphere or the visuals or the story. And it sustains it for just a little too long, and then is punctuated by a jump scare, like this one from It Follows. Or by finality, whether it be escape at the end, the sun rises, Sally rides off in the back of the truck in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or death. Jigsaw closes in his victim. That's the end. That's the punchline. It is why the Silent Hill 2 remake often had me feeling a lot like this, or like this, interchangeably. Subjecting yourself to 20 plus hours of built up tension like that is exhausting when there's no release. It makes a game like Dead Space, the remake, and Silent Hill 2 remake feel a less scary over time and more exhausting. Like it's a slog to get through the multi-tiered puzzles, combat sequences in search of that pressure valve of finality or victory. All of the games on this list that I've made me feel like this, or they made me feel like this. But they all also left me feeling a sense of relief by the end. So these three aspects, the atmosphere, the tension, and the brevity of the experiences of these 5 games, they all combine to make what I'm calling now a Pitchie certified heart shaker. They're games that deliver on their promise of being terrifying because they have incredible atmosphere. They have absolutely razor sharp tension, and they don't overstay their welcome. They're short enough to make you feel scared, but long enough to make you feel like they're worth it. They sit with you, they make your stomach turn, they make you think, they make you pay attention. And that's why they shake my heart. We're gonna run some honorable mentions. First up is Mothered, a role-playing game. It's available on Steam. It's a short little game that is super weird. It's so weird. it's a little too long, and it requires a little bit too much running around, in my opinion, to get any sort of sense of story, but it's very good. Mortuary Assistant, fantastic. The use of a varied scale of jump scares, from very, very small, something just out of the corner of your eye, to something literally grabbing you and throwing you, and just sprinkling them throughout, like a soupçon of jump scare, is delicious. It's delicious. I love the Mortuary Assistant. I loved the game. I loved the story that it was telling. I 100%ed that bitch. I embalmed 100 bodies. I found all the secrets. It's very good. I didn't put it on this list because I didn't think that it had enough atmosphere in it. Because after a certain point of seeing the jump scares and sort of doing reruns, it just sort of loses a little bit of the shine on it, a little bit of the effectiveness. But it is one of my favorites. I know I said that Dead Space 2023 made me feel exhausted, but caveat, the first 4 hours of it were really good and they were really scary. They scared the shit out of me. It made me feel, whenever Isaac was stomping down, it made me feel like, ah! I liked the first 4 hours of it. After that, it was too much. Way too much going on. It was too long, in my opinion. MyHouse.wad. MyHouse.wad isn't actively scary, but it is unnerving. There's just a distinct sense of wrongness. The minute that you start going through the house and you do a loop and you go through the house again and the doors open instead of going up, or when you're able to go downstairs, because, and I didn't even know this at the time, but original Doom maps are all horizontal. They use teleporters to get you from one place to another. So being able to go into a downstairs in a Doom map is unnatural. It feels wrong. Just a little subtle thing that is weird. It's weird. It is one of the prime examples of weird. Capital W. Paratopic. Paratopic is a short little game. It's actually one of the main inspirations for the structure of Mouthwashing. It's a short little game, available on Steam. It is weird as hell. I really enjoyed playing it, to be honest. I would highly recommend it. I can't even begin to describe to you what it's about because I really don't know. Who's Lila? Who's Lila is a detective game where you manipulate the characters, other side, the characters' facial expressions and dialogue choices in order to uncover a mystery. Got a lot of things to say about like personhood and identity, and it is the most like, if David Lynch could make a game, it would probably be this game. The developer Garage Heathen actually just recently released a demo for a new game called Last Look Along Woodward Boulevard, which is very difficult. It's very difficult. Soma. Now, I think Soma went on just a little too long for my taste. However, it's got a lot of that liminal existential vibe that I really like in a horror game, where it makes you really think about what's going on. And I mean, like, you get up to the first robot and yeah, you're going to turn it off because you need to get out. But the robot is, for all intents and purposes, a person. You are essentially killing a person in there, which is so fascinating to me. It's so horrifying. The atmosphere is fantastic in it because it's a frictional game. It's going to be fantastic. Again, just a little too long for me. It's just a little too long. I don't like games that go on for more than 6 hours when they are stealth horrors, but that's just me. And the last but certainly not least, Signalis. It is the closest you can get to the love child of Resident Evil and original Silent Hill. It also has some things to say about identity and its looping narrative and the way that it incorporates different influences from Russian literature and from German politics in the 80s. And its world building is so good. And the music is, fantastic. And that's it. That's it, folks. those are my Pitchie Certified Heart Shakers, my thoughts on horror theory and why these games are the best at what they do. They're short, they're to the point, they have incredible atmosphere, and they ramp up that tension and they keep it there until the final punchline. And just like my favorite games, this Pitchie Talks was a short one too. It's called brevity, people. It's called brevity. I gotta take advantage of it sometimes.